the kid that I can't find, but the kid's trying to describe at 6 years old what they're experiencing. It's amazing until you know what's going on with them. Anosmia, I get it, loss of sense of smell. Hypo or hyper? Well, partial damage, decreased sense of smell. There are plenty of times in which a sense of taste or smell can be altered. For example, if I have coffee and then try to eat a fry from here, the fry tastes awful. I'm not sure, well, that's not good there. Okay, the fries are normally okay if they're not too greasy. But you get the idea, right, that if the smell has been, or a taste has been altered or something, that can happen. You can muck around a little bit with that again, the rinsing out of the mouth. Dysosmia, distorted sensation. Synesthesia would be a really exaggerated example of this, right? Something doesn't quite smell right to a person, but so you could think of dysosmia and synesthesia are similar, obviously, on that. Parosmia, individuals, it's often connected to upper respiratory infection issues. Okay? Everything seems to smell bad or more bad than it should. Okay, so notice the common thing. Things smell bad or worse than they should. So something that might be slightly unpleasant to you is a very strong unpleasant thing to you. Something neutral to you may be a little unpleasant to them. But it's consistent, right? It's things smelling bad. Now, how do you think that connects to an upper respiratory infection? Maybe the mucus, maybe the whatever. I mean, generally smelling, things like infections and pus, bacteria aren't always rose bouquets, are they? So, they may very well simply be smelling their own infection. Okay? People who have really bad cocaine problems tend to have really, really clean apartments. Because as the inside of their nose starts to rot a little bit, they're always smelling bad. So they assume their apartment needs to be clean. So that would be an example in that regard. Phantosmia, on the other hand, smelling something when there's no smell there. So parosmia, you guys are saying, oh, the room smells a little funky. I'm like, oh God, it smells awful. Phantosmia, you guys are like, oh, we don't smell anything. And I'm thinking, I smell cotton candy. Well, wouldn't that be good right now, right? Do we need a cotton candy machine here? Yeah. Samsa, can you get on that already? Put it with the coffee, that would be awesome.
No, because it would melt.
Not in the coffee.
No, cotton candy would melt.
You think so?
Yeah.
I'm going to say no to that, and I'm voting for cotton candy here. I will apologize to you and bring you your bowl of cotton candy soon. Phantosmia, smelling something when nothing is there to smell. Okay, it's a phantom smell. It's a ghost. So don't get the two of them mixed up. Obviously, the phantosmia guy, it's probably an olfactory or an olfactory hallucination, right? And that's something to consider, right? It may be present and could indicate something else. So, an odor that occurs without any odors present is a phantom odor. It shouldn't be there. Phantosmia. Okay? Remember, sometimes people prior to migraines have those different auras, right? They might hear or see things or feel uptight or all kinds of million different symptoms, but one of them can be strange smells. It's not uncommon, like I just said, for that to occur before a seizure. So that would be called phantosmia. Olfactory reference syndrome, this one's perfect for being here. A persistent false belief that someone is emitting body odors that are foul and offensive to others. This is the person themselves. So I am convinced that I stink. Okay? And what happens is, you know, anybody over there, one of you goes, like, oh my God, is that because of me? Alright? The behavior of others is easily and often misperceived. So I'm convinced I stink, and if you even come into class late, it's because you were trying to avoid my smell, my funk, before you got to your seat. You know what I mean? Now, I do in fact shower every day, deodorant the whole bit, so Dr. Last emails are not directed at me. They're still trying to kind of figure out what this one is. Is it a small lesion, brain distortion, something? Were they born with it? It develops over time. It's just kind of an odd one. So there's a little sight for you on that one. Degustation, what do we need to consider on this? Taste. Why is it a little more complicated than olfactory? Because we have 3 cranial nerves involved, right? And even though 7's the only major clinical part, we still got to know the receptors and the ganglion and the rest of the standard issue on there. Taste receptors are not neurons. Even though they regrow, they're not neurons. So we're not going to find stem cells down here. We see basal cells, we see supporting cells, but we don't see basal stem cells, right? They can only be in the nose for the olfactory cells. So within a taste bud, which looks like a little circus balloon, all located in your tongue mostly, you have 3 different components, right? The gustatory cell itself, so the taste cell, the gustatory cell, my little modified epithelial guy here. And these guys last 10 days to 2 weeks. Supporting cells become taste cells, and basal cells become supporting cells. So it's just this constant turnover in your tongue and mouth area. Okay? And just like we saw before, we have a hair that's going to project into the areas with saliva and the trap food molecules and that kind of thing. So here is your standard image of a tongue, right? And textbooks still today have these areas separate, and we know that's not the case. There's a lot more mixing going on here. There are sweet receptors in the back of your tongue, that kind of thing. There are higher concentrations in certain areas, but not so much the way it's listed out there. It'll start to creep you out after a while. Okay, now what the heck, and back. There we go. All right. So we know we've got our standard 4 receptors, absolutely, but don't forget your umami, right? And what was the umami guy on there? That was that NSG beef broth kind of sensation to that. And not well known, but you actually have a 6th receptor. And it's not a baroreceptor or a pressure receptor, it actually tastes the water. So when you're able to taste the difference between tap and bottled water or whatever else, that's where that's coming from. Did you guys ever hear about that famous Perrier test in Manhattan? About 10 years ago, the Perrier company decided they're going to have this big production thing, right? Perrier and Manhattan tap water. Well, New York probably has the cleanest drinking water on the planet. So of course what happened is people kept taking the tap water instead of the Perrier, and they thought that was better, and Perrier tried to shut up and bury the results because they... So anyway, they ended up having to come up with a commercial where they made a joke about it, but the bottom line is New Yorkers picked tap water over Perrier. So that should tell you something, but they still tasted a difference. So that little guy on there, in case you ever need to tell the difference between tap water and Perrier, dates that good, they fall into the high maintenance category, and I would find someone else. Seriously. She gets up and goes to the bathroom, and you go, and you're already off to a bad start. Order the bottled water. Guys, you heard that one? Don't get the tap water. On a date. Waiter comes up and says, do you want bottled water or tap? What do you say?
Bottle.
Bottle. Yes. Because then the girl looks at you, really? Tap water?
No, I say, I want champagne.
If I take you out on a date and you want champagne, I will get you champagne. But in the meantime... Okay, could you guys focus on the lecture, please? So remember, your tongue's got all those big grooves, right? The circumvallate papillae, and all the taste buds are located in there. So saliva and the food molecules end up in there, and there's plenty of time to access them. So here's the actual hair, right? Extending here into the little groove and measures the taste. Remember, it's not the cranial nerve itself that does it, right? Cranial nerve 1 is here. I'm sorry, cranial nerve 1, 7, 9, and 10 or whatever are here. The taste bud talks to them, right? So the gustatory cell is a modified epithelial cell. It's got to do what? Talk to a first order taste neuron. What's that going to do? It's going to go to the nucleus solitarius, and what do we find there? Second order neurons that are going to go to the BPM and all that kind of thing, right? So that's from here, first order neurons consider. First order neurons here are not bipolar, right? This is 7, 9, and 10, so it's pseudo-unipolar, that makes sense. These are the three different ganglions associated with their taste, so nodos for 9, petrosal for 10, petrosal and then geniculate. And what do we need to know that we already know here? Right? Nucleus solitarius. So we include one new word here. All right? They could have called this a lemniscus. We'd already been happy about it, right? Gustatory lemniscus. Wouldn't have sounded good. Instead, they call it the central tegmental tract. So, second order neurons for taste have to go to the thalamus, but instead of calling it a lemniscus, they call it the central tegmental tract. All right, and notice what else do we see on here? Hypothalamus, amygdala, hippocampus. Can taste produce memories? Absolutely. Why is that like absolutely critical? Oh, this tastes like poison, better eat more. Okay? Something that made you throw up. If you ever had real food poisoning, it hits you hard and fast and you know exactly what it was you ate because you're in the bathroom for the next 2 days or whatever kind of thing. Whatever. So yes, it is very important to associate memories with taste for good and bad reasons. And survival. Agousia, when you lose your sense of taste. Hypo or hyper, obviously increased or decreased sensitivity. I get that one. Just like dysosmia, you can have a distorted sense, right? The coffee before the French fry distorted my sense of perception and taste for the fry. And paragousia, kind of what it sounds like. It's always different. Okay, the guy's always saying the fries don't taste right. This doesn't taste right, that doesn't taste right, and it's a constant condition. All right? Now, if you were born with paragousia, you have no idea if an apple tasted slightly different to you. So these are knock-on-the-head damage kind of things, right? And you get into, you noticed any change in your diet lately? She's like, yeah, everything tastes like fried food now, even apples. Okay, well, that's kind of important, right? And this would be an example of where that pops up into place here. Okay. Celebrity tongues. I haven't done celebrities for a while here. Probably want to turn your heads. Okay. I remember her name. She was in Transformers movies a long time ago. Who do you know is coming up on this slide? I would have said Gene Simmons, but no, I would totally agree though with Miley Cyrus. And there she is. I don't have to apologize for her being Canadian.
Kiss.
I thought she was,
Gene Simmons would have worked as well.
I thought she was from Tennessee.
Alright, so what's the deal here? Like I said, 3/4 of your sense of taste comes from your sense of smell. And it's simply because it is a far more detailed and accurate system. So the two of them together, you learn to call something a particular odor for a particular food, and whether it's appetitive to you or not, you get into individual differences. So, stuffy nose, food doesn't taste as good. And that brings us on to the auditory stuff. Now, most of this, or a lot of it we've seen before, basic cranial nerve 8 kind of deal, but we need to get more into the outer ear, the middle ear, and all that kind of stuff. So Weber's and Renee's are going to pop up in this one as well. And what are we looking at on here? What is the outer ear? Nice and simply, it's the thing you put your glasses on here. And the external auditory canal. Okay? So the auricle, the pinna, whatever you want to call this guy. And what is his purpose in life other than to hold your glasses up? It's absolutely going to funnel sound into your ear, right? So, all of this is the external auditory canal and the outer ear, which includes the tympanic membrane. And here we see two major causes of conductive hearing loss: wax buildup or damage to the tympanic membrane. Both of those are pure conductive hearing loss, like we did in the lab with blocking your ear. All right, the other name for earwax is cerumen. Wait long enough, they'll make 7 bloody movies out of it. We'll have to watch them all. Then we get to the middle ear. It is an air space. Remember, when we look at our middle ear, we see the auditory or eustachian tube. And that's a direct connection, what? Nasopharynx and air spaces do you have in your body? 10. Did you just make that up? Okay, I'm blaming you. Got my lungs. Is that it? Sinuses. Middle ear, basically, right? So what do you have a problem with when you're going up and down an airplane? It's the inner ear, right? Your ears popping, whatever, the middle ear, I mean. Your lungs, obviously, and your sinuses, you're breathing in and out, so the pressure's automatically equalizing. That's where you got to blow on your nose and all that stuff to get that equalizing thing happening. As we also recall, right, this is a major route of infection in kids. Right? Remember, in children, this is shorter, and the mucosal lining is always intact all the way through. So an ear infection or something else can easily cause a problem in other areas. Or something that was not an ear infection becomes one. 90% of kids have had a major ear infection by 5 years of age kind of thing. So, okay, ear infections are a drag, but in this case, ear infections can lead to meningitis. So that's our concern here, right? Why do adults not get inner middle ear infections? Because that tube is longer and it's dry. There's no way that a virus or thing can migrate up, right? If I coat the entire side of this with a gluey fluid lining, I mean, it's just like thinner. Right up to the ear it goes. So 90% of kids have had an ear infection by age 5. That'll tell you something. What have I got in here? 3 bones, malleus, incus, and stapes, or in America, what do we call them? Not the hemorrhoid, the hammer, anvil, and that thing on the back of your boot for riding horses. Americans, you don't know this one? Well, some people in here are from America. So, the hammer, the anvil, right? You know, anvil's that big metal thing you drop off a cliff to kill the roadrunner or whatever. You smash the hammer onto an anvil, so hammer, anvil. And then the last thing looks like, you know what a stirrup is on the back of your cowboy boot? That little spike. Well, wouldn't that last thing look like that, the stapes? That's why we don't go with that. Malleus, incus, stapes, beautiful. Now, what are my 2 cranial nerves I've got to consider in here? 7 and 5, right? What's the tensor tympani attached to? Tensor tympani is attached to the detail you might want to remember. What about 7? What is it innervating? That one's easy, right? The stapedius muscle. So, the stapedius muscle affects the movement of the stapes. So, remember your stapedial reflex, right? There's a loud noise, 7's activated, the stapes can't move as much, and therefore sound transmission is decreased. So, our stapedial reflex is our loud noise environment thing. Stapedius muscle contracts, the stapes can't move as well, and sound transduction is decreased. When I damage 7, there's no restriction on the stapes, and it gets too much noise. So, kind of illustrated nicely up here, the stapes either moves too much or too little, depending on what the situation is. So 7 is going to be majorly involved in there. You might want to read up on your tensor tympani. Then what have we got? We have the inner ear. And that's going to be blocked into 2 parts. Right? Our semicircular canals for balance. Right? Vestibular. And notice there are 3 canals. X, Y, Z. Right? 3 dimensions. 3 canals. Then we've got our cochlea, which does what? That's our auditory stuff. That's going to lead to 2 nerves, right? Vestibular and cochlear. So, what do we need to consider? How does your balance work? And what's going on with this hearing thing? So, if you don't like the word ear, you can call it the statoacoustic organ. And people can call you a pompous ass, and it works out rather well. So just go with ear, much better choice. handheld style video games, this should look familiar to you. And that's about it. Does this even work? No. Alright, let's go on to the next one. So what do we need to consider here? How is sound transduced? Right? I mean, sound waves are coming through the air here, but your inner ear is full of fluid. And at some point, a noise has to turn into a song or a word or whatever, and that's a whole different story. So what happens? Sound waves come through the external auditory canal. They vibrate the tympanic membrane, which is like a drum skin. Okay, you play a drum, bam, bam, bam. It's the same idea. It's got to be strong and taut, right? Otherwise it won't vibrate. That moves the three middle ear bones, and what happens? The stapes starts pounding on the oval window of the inner ear. That will send waves through here. But notice, right, fluid does not compress. So if I push in here on the oval window, you got to be able to push out somewhere else. So the oval and the round windows, kind of this sort of deal. Now, watching me for a second. Okay? I've clearly got waves going this direction. And then what do? They're coming that way, right? So the waves are going like this, which means the basilar membrane in the middle is doing that. And when this is going back and forth, hair cells are bending, and you get sound transduction. So that's the gist of it. Waves going in the top of the cochlea, the bottom of the cochlea. It's going to get back and forth movement going on. Hair cells bend backward or forward. And depending on what part of the cochlea is affected, well, then you're talking about different frequencies. So that's it in a nutshell. Sound from air, or sound going through air, what does the middle ear do? It turns that into sound going through fluid. So in the inner ear, it's fluid only. And then what? Cranial nerve 8 is going to be attached to the basilar membrane in here. Now the basic idea here, right? How about loudness? That's easy to understand, right? How can I perceive loudness? Well, this or I can talk like that. You can clearly tell the difference. The loud is going to move things in the ear more, right? But what about frequency? Like high frequency and low frequency. Different story. But fortunately I have a cool video for that we'll get to.
So here we are with a view of the cochlea. The cochlea now uncoils, and we look at the basilar membrane, and now see what happens when we play individual tones.
This is the base, okay? Or the end. Yeah, you're right, it's the end. It's wide, and it's not so flexible. So it tends to pick up high or low frequency noises, right? We just saw that here. But the other end, the narrow end, that picks up high frequency. So these are individual tunes, or tones, pure tones.
See what happens when
What do
we
we
play
see? Low
individual
frequency
tones.
does the wide part of the membrane. And as we go higher, it moves up. If you play all three
Now,
notes at the same time,
And finally, something really complex. I want to pass the collection plate around after that. But you can see what's going on there, right? If you are learned by experience that if it activates those four parts, it sounds like a hello. If it activates them stronger, then it comes across hello, and it could just go like that. So obviously there's a big learning component of here when you figure out what all these sounds mean, but that's just like learning anything else. speak louder, you're gonna make the thing move more, so loudness is easy. And frequency depends on the fact that the basilar membrane is not the same, it changes shape and flexibility, right, like it says here. So that enables you to beautifully be able to hear all the stuff that you've been doing. So that's the cochlea.